Hey, what's going on, English 3 AP students? I wanted to go over some of the things that we went over in class today. It is December 15th, 2020, and we began looking at the rhetorical fallacies. You've already gone over the rhetorical situation, appeals, and tools. Those notes and videos are still available, so if anything is being said that sounds unfamiliar, feel free to take a look at those, and as always, you can shoot me a question. That's what I'm here for. So for today, we're going to be looking at the fallacies. So we're going to scroll down to where the fallacies begin, and I will narrate just because there are some things that are in there are some things related to fallacies that aren't necessarily in the presentation because A, I want to save space, and B, it's better for me to just explain some of these to help you understand. So, first and foremost, what is a fallacy? Well, a fallacy is an error in reasoning. A good way to think of a fallacy is the prefix FAL is the same prefix in the word false. So a fallacy is essentially false. It is an error in reasoning. In rhetoric, a rhetorical fallacy, it's similar. It's an error in reasoning, much like a logical fallacy would be, but a rhetorical fallacy is a deliberate attempt to make erroneous or irrelevant information appear truthful. This is why that's why it's important to know these things, because people will try to use fallacies to get their point across and try to prove a point that is either unprovable or just patently false. So, and I think I told my class the big thing to remember is this right here, the word deliberate. It's a deliberate attempt to make erroneous or irrelevant information appear truthful. So before we begin talking about the rhetorical fallacies, we're going to talk about two major logical fallacies, and these are fallacies that many people engage in. I think that logical and rhetorical fallacies are really important for you to study, just because it certainly affects your day-to-day life, I think, in ways that you may not be aware of. If you're someone who follows politics, especially if you follow politicians, be it their speeches or debates or anything like that, you're going to catch these. And if you weren't aware of rhetorical or logical fallacies, you may fall prey to those bad ideas. So first off, let's talk confirmation bias. What is that? Well, it's biased, of course. You hear the word bias a lot, but you may not necessarily understand what biased means. And to be biased means you are withholding certain information, or you are deliberately distorting the truth to suit your goals. That's just regular bias. Confirmation bias, and you see the word confirm right there, you only seek out information that further proves already held beliefs. So it's sort of like a corruption of the scientific method. You know, the scientific method, you start with a hypothesis, you look at the evidence, and you reach a conclusion based on the evidence. Well, this confirmation bias, you already have the conclusion, you seek out evidence that supports the conclusion you already have, and you just further reaffirm whatever conclusion you've reached. That's why it's called confirmation bias. You only seek out the things that confirm what you already believe. So, for example, and I like to use conspiracy theories. Let's use a silly one. Let's use one that just is not true whatsoever, and that is that the earth is flat. So, if you engage in confirmation bias, you're only going to seek out sources that support your conclusion that the earth is flat. You never mind the 99.9 repeating percent of experts and people who will tell you that the earth is round. Never mind, science and common sense. You seek out those one or two sources that confirm what you already believe. Confirmation bias is the birth of any and every conspiracy theory. And most of the time, too, when it comes to a conspiracy theory, you're not even looking at evidence or the facts. You may look at a claim someone else makes, and then you follow their evidence, and then their evidence is just another claim and another claim, and so it just goes down, quote, go down the rabbit hole, as you've probably heard. But at the end of the day, they're only seeking out things that support what they already believe, and that's not good. You need to find verifiable, trusted sources. And what do we mean by verifiable? Well, multiple people have verified it. There's a joke that I heard once that in regards to a conspiracy theory, and it was a spin on the old quote. I'm sure you've heard the quote, if it looks like a duck, quacks like a duck, and walks like a duck, it's a duck. But the joke goes, if it looks like a duck, quacks like a duck, and walks like a duck, it's a 50-year conspiracy created by the government to trick you. So you see how ridiculous it eventually becomes. Confirmation bias is one of those things. It is at its core ridiculous. When I say only seeking out information that supports what you already believe, it sounds ridiculous on a lot of levels, but people do it. Next up, we're going to talk about cognitive dissonance. And this is where you ignore valid information that contradicts already held beliefs. So cognitive dissonance would be, say there's maybe a celebrity that you admire, and you admire them because you think they're a really good moral person. And then they get caught doing something really immoral. And so what you end up doing is you say, okay, I'm either going to ignore that, I'm going to say, well, they were lying. Maybe you hold up this person to be moral or what you believe to be good, and when there's evidence that shows that maybe they're not good, or maybe they're not as moral as you thought they were, you either ignore that evidence, or you pretend that there's some hidden or secret agenda, and that the people who created that evidence are lying because they, for some reason, want to slander that celebrity or that politician or whoever you may want to believe is moral or good. This happens a lot right now in politics, on really both sides of the aisle. People will support a candidate, and if that candidate acts in a way that undercuts what they believe that candidate is, for example, if you think that a presidential candidate is moral and good, and then they act in a way that's not moral, or say something that's immoral, you either make excuses for it, still claiming that they are moral, or you say, well, that was a lie, that didn't happen, fake news, whatever it may be. That's cognitive dissonance. You are ignoring valid facts that would contradict what you already believe to be, what you already believe about a person or an event. So, we're not going to get through all of these. This is just the beginning. So first off, ad hominem. Ad hominem is Latin. It means to the man. This is a personal attack on the speaker. This is often done when an opponent is either ignorant of an issue or, to put it bluntly, intellectually incapable of debating an issue. So let's pretend that I'm running for Senate, and my opponent wants to lower taxes for small businesses. And we get on the debate stage, and they lay out their tax plan about how they're going to reduce small business taxes and how that will be beneficial, how it'll help the economy, and they lay it all out. They provide evidence for why their plan would work. In a normal debate or a normal discussion, I would offer my position and show why my tax plan is better than theirs. But instead of doing that, I just attack the person. I call them dumb. I call them an idiot. I say, your plan's stupid. You're stupid. Why are we listening to them? That's ad hominem. That is an attack on the person. If you are politically inclined, if you've watched any political debates, the presidential debates that we just had a few months ago, go back to even 2016, you're going to see just a lot of personal attacks. And that's kind of what politics has started to lean towards. They need to get out of it, because at some point the debate the debate is no longer a commentary on whose policies are better. It's just who can lay the worst insults. And that's all it is. It's an insult. You're insulting the person. You're not really offering up your views or your positions on topics. Next up is an appeal to ignorance. This is the idea that because something cannot be disproven, it must be true. I'm sure you have a friend who has said, prove me wrong, prove me wrong. Well, they haven't proven that they are right. They'll claim something ridiculous and then say, prove me wrong. What you do in a situation like that is you just say, no, you need to prove that you are right before you can demand that someone else prove you wrong. So appeal to ignorance simply because it cannot be disproven, it must be true. This is false. For example, no one can disprove that the Loch Ness Monster doesn't exist, so she must be real. This idea, the appeal to ignorance fallacy, is also called Russell's teapot. And Bertrand Russell, 20th century British philosopher, said that you cannot prove right now that there is not a teapot orbiting Saturn. Now, if you had a powerful telescope and a satellite with a camera, you could prove it. But right now, as you are listening to this, you cannot prove that there's not a teapot orbiting Saturn. Does it make it true? Well, no. You can't prove that there's not a dinosaur orbiting Saturn. You can't prove that there's not a iPhone orbiting Saturn. Just because you cannot prove that it is not true, it must be true, is a bad idea. We know that teapots don't exist in space. So this is where logic comes in. But moreover, when someone makes a claim and demands that someone else prove them wrong, you need to fire back with, no, how about you prove that you are right before I begin proving you wrong? Begging the question, circular reasoning. This is a fun one. This is using a claim to support itself. This is like saying, well, here's the example. Everyone wants to watch Stranger Things because it's the most popular show of the season. And then if you were to ask, why is it the most popular show of the season? They say, because everyone wants to watch it. I think another example you could consider would be to say, maybe in the context of sports, if somebody were to say, well, I'm a great soccer player because I'm on the starting squad. Well, why are you on the starting squad? Well, because I'm a great soccer player. No evidence is really provided. Claims are just made to support themselves. And maybe to go back to the beginning to talk a little bit about something like maybe a conspiracy theory, often you'll find circular reasoning when it comes to those. And so, let's go to the next slide. Ad populum. This is also called the bandwagon fallacy. It assumes that something is correct because it is popular. So, for example, over 3.3 million customers have switched to Verizon. Why haven't you? It's also kind of like saying 30 million people can't be wrong. Buy Chevy or whatever. It's an appeal to popularity. And it assumes that just because something is popular, that it is the right thing to do. And that is not necessarily true. A ton of people can do something and still be wrong. So keep that in mind. If somebody's trying to use popularity to get you to do something, vote for candidate X because everyone else is going to vote for candidate X. That's a fallacy. There's not really any evidence within that to support a line of reasoning. So I'm going to go ahead and call it right there, I believe. I think, yeah, next is false dichotomy, and I'll pick up there tomorrow. So hope you're doing well, and stay safe.